Life Unrehearsed, brought to you by Lianas Senior Transition Support, helping you navigate home care and senior residences.
Welcome to Life Unrehearsed. I'm Corrie Sirota, clinical social worker and psychotherapist specializing in grief and loss. Matt Delvecchio, my co-host, is in Toronto today, so I am flying solo, but that's okay because I have some incredible guests that I can't wait to interview. Coming up on today's show, autoimmune diseases. They are more prevalent today than you would ever imagine, and we're going to hear a young woman's journey in battling a rare autoimmune skin disease. And if that isn't enough to hear about, we're also going to hear on our second half of our show, in recognition of Breast Cancer Awareness Month, we're going to be interviewing the founder of Empower Inc., INK, organizing mastectomy tattoos so that women can have beauty on their own terms. Cannot wait to interview Karen. She's been on the show before, so stay tuned for that. But let's get right started with today's first guest, Tara Saxe, MSW, PSW. She's a clinical social worker. She works at a school as a social worker. It's a school in Montreal for students with neurodevelopmental conditions. She's married and she's the proud mother of two absolutely deliciously gorgeous boys. One who she recently delivered on her second son only this past April. You'd never know it by looking at her. Tara is also living with a severe autoimmune skin disease, which she's going to share with us all of the ins and outs of that. So, Tara, welcome to Life Unrehearsed.
Thank you so much for having me.
So let's start right away with what was life like prior to the diagnosis?
So prior to my diagnosis, I guess I think of my life as chapters of a book. Many of those chapters just before I was diagnosed were some of the more exciting chapters that I wanted to just read over and over again, like getting engaged, planning my wedding, getting married, moving into my first home, finishing my master's degree in social work, and starting my career as a social worker. I was only 27, and being someone who was quite anxious, I always liked to plan my life. And here I was with PV, and this was completely out of my control, and this was definitely not part of my plan.
Without a doubt, and we're going to define what PV is, but hang on, because I want to go back to when did you even notice something was happening or something was wrong?
Mm-hmm. So that goes back, I'd say a few months before I got married. So that was spring of 2014, and my gums were really red, to the point that I had even told my wedding photographer, could you do something with the pictures? Could you filter it out? My smile's looking a little red. And that summer I was finishing my master's degree, so there was a lot of writing involved, and I was experiencing weird joint pain, and my doctor had said, it's probably because of the anxiety. A lot has gone on this year. You're finishing your master's. So I let it go. And I fast forward 6 months, and I'm now February 2015. And I went on a weekend vacation with my family to New York City. And I was walking around all day, and I was wearing a crossbody bag. And I returned to my hotel room that evening to find 3 blisters on my back. And I had told my husband, I said, this is really weird. And later at dinner, I had said to my mom, doesn't really make sense. So I get back to Montreal and I'm prescribed an ointment for my blisters, and it doesn't go away. A few weeks later, my gums started to tear. My lips started having blisters. My forehead had a blister. I couldn't eat. I was on a liquid diet, literally having smoothies and milkshakes as a means to get in my calories. I was diagnosed with gingivitis. Wasn't that. Blisters continued appearing. I was diagnosed with impetigo. Wasn't that. I was recommended to go on a gluten-free diet. Nothing changed. Weeks later, blisters covered my scalp. My scalp became raw, and my hair started falling out. And the blisters then just multiplied over my body, and the ones that had existed just started growing. I was in so much pain. What I would often do during that short time frame is I'd go to my parents' house after work because my husband was still out at work, and I wasn't able to shower on my own at that time. So I'd go over to my parents and I'd have my mom wash my hair for me because just the shampoo from the soap suds, if I would go shower on my own, was just so impossible to bear. And she would wash my hair for me. And I looked at her that afternoon and I said, I need to go to the emergency room. Something's wrong. And at that time, I had immense support from an infectious disease doctor who was helping me sort of navigate this journey. But at that time, I went to the emergency room, again, unsure of what I had, but I was referred to a dermatologist. And unfortunately, that dermatologist was going on vacation that evening, but he looked at me and he said, "You have Bullous pemphigoid or pemphigus vulgaris, and you need a skin biopsy." But he wasn't able to provide me with this immediate follow-up. So I had spoken again with my infectious disease doctor, and she connected me immediately with one of her colleagues who was a dermatologist, looked at a picture of my back and said, "You have pemphigus vulgaris. You need a skin biopsy." And right then I was sent to the Montreal General Hospital for a skin biopsy. But typically that takes 3 weeks to get results. And I said to them both, I said, I can't live with this. I need to have some type of medication. I need some type of treatment. So at that point, I was put on a high dose of prednisone, and I was told I'd be in waiting this infusion treatment.
Okay, so I'm going to stop you there. That's the voice of Tara Saxe. She's a clinical social worker who works with neurodevelopmental children at a school in Montreal. She's married. She's got 2 beautiful little boys. She's also been diagnosed and is living with a severe autoimmune skin disease, which we are now, you had discovered, is pemphigus vulgaris. And so what is that?
Quite a word, eh?
Yeah.
So pemphigus vulgaris, PV, it's a rare long-term condition caused by a problem with the immune system. It's an autoimmune skin disorder, and this rare skin disorder is characterized by blistering of your skin and mucous membranes. It's an estimated of 1 to 5 out of every 1 million people receive a diagnosis of PV throughout the world each year. And unfortunately, as my doctor had said, I was 27 when I was diagnosed, and often it seems to be more in older people that are in their 50s or 60s.
So you can hear, listeners, this is unbelievable how intense, how shocking this must have been. Now you talked a little bit about getting the diagnosis, and I know that getting the diagnosis is key. So what has the journey been from there?
So again, as we go back to 2015, initially I had lost a lot of weight. The blisters in my mouth were so unmanageable. I couldn't eat. And I know no one's seeing what I look like here, but I'm quite petite. I am 4'11" and I'm under 100 pounds. So I had lost a lot of weight, which was quite difficult. It was really hard to wear clothing without bandages. So because my blisters would stick to my clothes. I'd put on my ointment and they would stick to my clothes. So my new normal was that I would have my mother, my husband, and my friends at work literally put ointment and saran wrap my back so that this saran wrap would act as a barrier between my blisters and my clothing. I'd wear a lot of black clothes because the ointment would go through any light clothing. And when my scalp became really raw, I'd wear a hat at the time just to protect my hair. Fortunately, at that time, it was spring, so the hat did make sense. But open blisters makes one more susceptible to infections. So I had to make sure that my head was always covered. I had a special body wash. I had eye ointment, I had a scalp ointment, I had cortisone cream for the lesions in my body. So I had a lot of ointments to apply morning and night. But with that, I was also on a high dose of prednisone. And I was on prednisone for 9 months. What is prednisone? It's a medication used to suppress one's immune system and increase inflammation. And I was on this while I waited for my biological treatment called Rituxan.
Can you talk about that biological treatment, the infusion?
Yeah, so Rituxan is a B-cell antibody treatment. So what it does is it depletes your B cells. And at the same time, it suppresses your immune system. So in order to access this treatment, at least back then in 2015, it had to be approved by insurance. And at that time, pemphigus was not one of the conditions. So I had several applications that I had to make in order to be approved for Rituxan. But with that, because it suppresses your immune system so much, you have to have so many vaccines to make sure that you're not going to, you have to make sure that you're protected, that you're not going to catch any other infections. So the amount of vaccines I had to take was quite something.
This is quite the journey that you're listening to. It's Life Unrehearsed. I'm Corrie Sirota. Missing today is Matt Delvecchio, and we are talking to Tara Saxe about a very serious autoimmune skin disease called pemphigus vulgaris. But when we come back, we're going to hear about what was one of your biggest concerns related to being diagnosed with this condition. I'm having the most phenomenal interview with Tara Saxe, who's a clinical social worker. She works at a school in Montreal for students with neurodevelopmental conditions, but we are talking about the severe autoimmune skin condition that she has been living with for the last 7 years. It's called pemphigus vulgaris, and it's really taken its toll, but she is a warrior, and she has just shown up and doing what she needs to do. So just we want to put the word out there. So before traffic, I had asked Tara, what, given this condition, and how much there were different life changes that she had to make, what was her biggest, what is your biggest concern?
So after being diagnosed with PV only 11 months after being married, I had no idea where my life was heading. I was someone who always wanted to have control, and here I was, and I couldn't have control of anything right now. It was unclear when and if I could have children. And many people who had heard about having pemphigus vulgaris, or who my dermatologist had as patients, were in their 50s and 60s. So they weren't in their childbearing years. And initially, my doctor had told me that I would have to wait 2 years after my Rituxan treatment. And that would be only if I would react well to Rituxan. So just going back to Rituxan, it's administered in 2 doses, 2 weeks apart on day 1 and day 15. They're full day long treatments. And that's assuming that after my second dose, that I would have no relapse, no flare-ups 6 months later. So there was a lot of unknowns. Would I react well? What would be in 6 months? And after doing research, my dermatologist came back to me and said that, okay, after a year, the possibility would be there of starting a family. But again, what would that journey look like? So I did have my first son over 4 years ago, but a year and a half ago, I was getting the odd spot. Unfortunately, they would heal with just some cream, but treatment wasn't needed. But with that said, I didn't know what now was my journey to possibly grow my family and have a second child. And I didn't know what would it look like if I got PV and I was pregnant, or I would have treatment. And I was so fortunate to be connected with this incredible internist who specializes in autoimmune conditions and pregnancy. And she really navigated me through the entire what ifs of relapsing before pregnancy, during pregnancy, what I would do. And fortunately, and I am so grateful, but my condition remained stable throughout my pregnancy. And as Corrie had said, I did give birth to my second son 6 months ago this past April.
And congratulations. Like I said,
you.
I've seen some of the pictures. They are gorgeous. If you look on our Life Unrehearsed Facebook page and you look at Tara, you will see how absolutely beautiful she is. And when she describes the conditions and what had happened, and lesions on her face, on her body, on her hair, losing so much weight, this is not for the faint of heart or the weak, for sure not, which is why I call anyone who's struggling with these kinds of conditions a true warrior. So tell me, Tara, what helps?
I think what helps is, and I had said it before, the support of my family and my friends throughout the journey. I mean, to the point of my husband, my mother, and my friends literally applying ointment to my back and wrapping me with saran wrap to accompany me to my infusion treatments, and just trying to understand, and still now 8 years later, of supporting me and really my entire family, from my parents and my in-laws and my siblings and my whole network of friends. It's been really, really helpful, and I'm so grateful. Another support that I had along the way, and when I talked about prednisone, after losing the weight, being put on prednisone for 9 months, it was like living with a monster inside of me. It really, really was. My mood on prednisone was a fast-paced roller coaster, this nauseating ride that I just wanted to come to an end. And for someone who is quite tiny, I developed a moon face. I was completely distorted. I was unrecognizable to the point that I would walk in the community and say hi to people, and they didn't know who I was. I was agitated. It was hard to sleep. I had to have a sleeping pill to help me. It was really, really hard. Loud places were very difficult. Obviously, I couldn't travel, but even concerts or big restaurants were hard. So it was adapting to a new normal of what I could do. One person that really supported me throughout the way was a girl in my community. She was actually diagnosed with cancer at 21, and at that point, when I was sick, she was in remission, but she was on prednisone during her journey, and I felt a connection to her because she understood what I was going through. But something that really helped me was I wrote a blog after my cancer treatment, and I titled it as "You Always Have a Choice." And what I meant by that is life is not about what happens to you, but it's how you react to it. It's really about your attitude and the experiences that you have in life, whether good, bad, or indifferent. We could feel sorry for ourselves, and I could have stayed in bed and hid under the covers and cried and taken off work. But really, life's experiences are either opportunities to grow or obstacles that right. keep us from growing.
Absolutely. Well said. That's the voice of Tara Saxe, clinical social worker. She is also living with a severe autoimmune skin disease called pemphigus vulgaris. So how would you, or what advice would you give someone who's been recently diagnosed? Mm-hmm.
I would definitely speak to your doctors. I mean, as I said, it took, many misdiagnoses to get to where I'm at, and advocate for yourself. Use your support network as a means to help you go through it. But this condition does have a life of its own, and it can change from one day to the next. So really, generate awareness. There are opportunities to seek support even in the community and on social media and social platforms. And that's what really helped me get through it.
So can you tell us where are you at with your condition now?
So right now, I was in remission for 3 years after my first diagnosis. I did relapse 9 weeks after I had my first son, and that was the concern for now. But fortunately, 2 months later, I am still in a very dormant stage. It is a little bit mild. I will get the odd spot, but right now I use just cortisone ointment, right. And I'm not in need of medication right now. So it just become part of who I am.
Thank you so much. You hear this harrowing experience from Tara, and she could not have been more forthcoming and transparent about it. So I want to thank you for sharing your story with us. And I will now drop a big bomb on everybody who is listening. Why do I know Tara? Tara was my student, and I remember that Tara went through this horrible experience, and I reached out to her because the student became the teacher, because in June 2022, I was diagnosed with pemphigus vulgaris. So while the numbers are 1 in a million, 1 to 5 in a million, 2 of them are sitting in the studio right now, and Tara was absolutely invaluable to offering me support. And thankfully, I've had the infusion treatments, and I'm going through my own journey. But it's like I said, not for the faint of heart. But thank you so much, Tara, for your time and for coming in.
Thank you, Corrie.
Coming up on Life Unrehearsed, meet Karen Malkin-Lazarevich. She's a creator of Empower Inc., mastectomy tattoos so that women can have beauty on their own terms.